Welcome to Word of the Day.
Impartial and just.
I believe that this could change.
Also an illustrator.
I had a poem I wanted to share.
Join me today for the poem of the day.
Aggressive action against a place or enemy force.
Today's word of the day is test.
My favorite character that I have written.
What motivates me to create?
Hunger is seriously one of my favorite poems I think I've
Been
ever
working
written.
so hard to build this magazine and bring it to you guys. This is the Guilded Periodically Podcast, brought to you by the Fiction Forge. Hello, friends, Romans, countrymen. Welcome to our cover episode of Guilded Periodically. As always, I'm your host, Hues, here from the Fiction Forge, and today I'm actually hanging out with our lovely Looch. I love them so much. So, Looch, why don't you tell our listeners, a little bit about yourself?
Well, that's my name, Looch, or Alex. I'm known on the internet as Looch or Belucho. I'm an illustrator and video game concept artist. I also do tarot readings on TikTok, though it's been a while. I love tabletop RPGs, like D&D type stuff. Yeah.
Looch is super fun to play games with. We've taken a little break because everybody got busy with work and our magazine, but we usually play games once or twice a month, and it's usually really fucking fun. Looch is so fun to play games with. But Looch is an amazing artist, and that is actually why we asked them to make our cover. So Looch donated their time, energy, and resources to make the cover of our spring 2024 issue, which for those of you who might be seeing impaired, has a very beautiful black and white African-American human who is striking down a rat king in a park with a wonderful wand, kind of leaning towards a little bit of Ace of Wands inspiration, and it's got rainbow sparkles, magical girl style, and it's absolutely stunning. And it turned out so much better than I thought it was going to. Not that I was thinking poorly, I just didn't have expectations. I was I'm fine with whatever Looch comes up with, if it's cartoony, if it's avant-garde. We did have a little bit of inspiration, right? I think I showed you, I think it was the painting of Lucifer that I showed you, that's a Renaissance painting that I was talking about doing for the cover or something like that.
Yeah, I pulled it up. I got it on my screen. But the first thing, whenever you pitched the magazine, you talked about, I think, the cover. Well, the magazine in general being kind of revolution themed, and that you were inspired by Renaissance artwork, with the themes of the Renaissance being this kind of overthrow and artistic revolution, essentially. So you showed us one of the paintings, because there's many of them and I can't remember exactly which one it was, but there's a lot of Renaissance artists that depicted the same kind of scene with a similar composition of the Archangel Michael fighting Satan with a sword and holding scales. I'm looking at a few of them.
Yeah, I think that's the exact one, actually.
Yeah.
Striking down Luciferus.
Exactly. And I was inspired by that. And at that point, I didn't really know what my contribution to the magazine was going to be, because I haven't been writing poems or short stories or anything, but I love to draw. And so I saw that as the way that I definitely wanted to contribute. So I offered to do the cover. And I also thought it was funny because I was okay, I'm going to tap into my Italian ancestry here. I'm going to channel my inner Michelangelo. And I don't know if I was successful in that aspect.
I do.
There was definitely some interesting parts of the creative process. Just working on it over time. For example, first thing being that when I started working on this, I was on the plane, and I actually didn't know that I was working on it at the time. I just started drawing a figure, and then it just started kind of coming out, and I was working with a black background and just it's all digital, but a white kind of oil pastel, gouache type of deal, because I was trying to learn more about more of a painting style, because usually I do more of a cartoony, I make a lot of cartoon characters and hard line work, but I've always wanted to be better at blending and painting and everything. So I just started like pulling this character out of the darkness using like white lines and like emphasizing the highlights and everything. But it started like once I knew what I was doing, at least that this figure was coming out of, okay, I got this character and they've got this like branch wand. And it just kind of started there with like black and white only. And at first I thought that was kind of how it was going to be and end up. But then like through, like we just started talking about it and like I would just show it to you every now and then and you would give me feedback. Oh, that's a great idea. And we would talk about it. And I just added more and more. So it was created over a long period of time.
Yeah.
I just kept on coming back to it. And I think that my favorite part of it is something that I don't know if I think it comes across, but just like those layers, because it was like, okay, it's black and white. And then I added like the background and I added in the rat king in the foreground. It was still in black and white. And then you're like, okay, but let's bring some color into it. And now the lightning has color and there's kind of like highlights of color on the rat. And you're like, okay, but what if there was more color? I'm like, okay, more color when we bring the color into the background. And so it's still got this kind of like remnant quality, I guess, of like you can see like the stages that I went through, because to some degree the like characters are still somewhat in like a monotone color scheme minus like some highlights and colors and the lighting and everything. But my favorite part about it is just how you can see like how those layers built up over time. And that was probably my favorite part of the process as well.
That's my favorite part about it too, is just like how multi-layered it is. And listening to you like describe it just then made me think about how much that is so much like a revolution, right? Like finding a light in a dark space. So you started with a black canvas, painting with the white, pushing. And also like, you guys have not met Drew yet, but when you do, you'll understand like why I think this is really crazy. But like, it wasn't until like after it had been like developed a lot that we realized that this character looks a lot like our teammate Drew. And it's not, and like I mean like maybe Looch was inspired by Drew. Everyone should be inspired by Drew. They're an inspiration to me. But like it just like feels so much of like Drew's like softness, transformative energy, that like it was so funny in our last meeting when Drew was like, did anybody else just like notice that this looks a lot like me? And like all of us sitting there being like, yeah, we've been thinking this the whole time. Because like Drew, I think that this is like maybe the first time Drew got to see like the cover or like part of the cover, because like we've been meeting once a week for the last like year, but like longer, like closer together, like in the past like 6 months, like every single week with this. And so Looch would bring it sometimes and like we would give feedback. And like so like when we started adding the colors, like I didn't think of it that way until you just said it, but like the idea of like coming from the darkness, providing light, and then from light receiving like technicolor or like the brilliance of like the multi-prismic color scheme, and like how that is like so fiction forge core, like, and I don't mean to like gloat on us so that way, but like that is literally what we want, right? As a team, is like we've been wanting to do that. And I do think that that's my favorite part, like one of my favorite parts about it too, visually. And also like I love how good it looked mirrored, because it also like we put it on the back cover and like, oh my god, it looked so good mirrored that way. I was like, that's right.
That was a part I didn't expect, like, because that only kind of came to be like last minute, because I sent it to you like a week out from like the last possible demo. I just kept not like even 2 days before. At least you'd seen it, so you knew where it was going, but I just kept on asking you like, how long do I have for this?
I remember.
But yeah, I mean, and then as far as the Drew thing, like I'm definitely not going to pretend like I didn't consider that like throughout, like like at least Drew brought it up in like the last meeting, but in like considering like what type of figure I would have here, I was thinking about like the archetypal like character that like the fiction forge is meant to like uphold and like represent through
The cult of Drew. That's all the Fiction Forge is.
No, but like the service that the Fiction Forge provides and like uplifting like marginalized voices and everything. So I definitely wanted to create like a Black trans character to represent that, an artist.
No, I agree, because I mean that is like our like go-to, like for the Fiction Forge at least, like we want to uplift like all marginalized voices at all intersections, but like the most intersected, the most like marginalized would be like in that regard like our ideal member, because like they're the ones that get the least opportunity to have their like voice heard. And so like I just do think that like you really captured that and like brought that forth, especially like with some of the symbolism, which like can we talk about some of the symbolism that like you added, and like how did you feel about the rat when we suggested the rat, for example?
I thought the rat was perfect because that was your idea, but yeah, there was definitely,
but you executed it.
Okay, but we started with like it was just the character, and I hadn't really considered like the nemesis, but like as far as the symbolism, the Rat King is perfect because like in media what it represents is kind of this like both a figurehead but also kind of like a nebulous, like impossible to nail down, like conglomerate sickness,
right?
Like it all kind of culminates in like a dominating like hierarchical figure, but it's not like centralized, I guess. Like it's so in that sense I think that it was perfect to consider like that archetype of the Rat King, and so this figure is like casting them out of this. I wanted it to be sort of a futuristic, sort of like solar punk inspired city. I didn't include too many like technological elements. I was more focused on having like the nature, and I think somewhat of like the color palette being like hopeful and more like springy pastels, but also a little bit futuristic with like the saturation and everything.
So like
yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, when it comes to your like the concept of like it being like a solar punk city and like having more hopeful colors, like what was your intention? Like what were you hoping to do with that? Like visually, like what's the takeaway from that whenever it comes to like maybe like your revolution when it comes to like this art, right? Like so like also like, but seriously, like what does that say about your desires for the future, do you think?
It brings me back to like the process of making it, like the ways that the colors came into like the different aspects of it, because I don't know, like art obviously is like a transformative process. So there's something in me, like when I'm picturing the future, that said like I'm making this thing black and white, and then like through that, like pulling out like the nuance and like the different colors. And I didn't just want it to be like regular, like the typical, oh my gosh, what is it called? Local color, right? Like,
right.
So I put like purples and blues, and I wanted it to overlap and kind of have this, like you were talking about, like Prismacolor, kind of like Wizard of Oz aspect to it.
Yeah, you definitely have that dream aspect for sure.
Like it's being pulled into physical form through imagination in particular, because I think that was like, you hold a vision for this future, and like bring it to be. So when you suggested making a background, immediately what I thought of was making a kind of like futuristic city, but not the type of like futuristic city that we're used to seeing, or like not like a cyberpunk dystopia, but one like genre that I've been excited about recently is like solar punk and like biopunk. Basically like a future that embraces like community and nature, but not in like a utopia sense, but also like like embracing the technology that we do have. Like that was the type of city that I wanted to portray.
I think you did.
I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. And like, listen, like, I'm so curious because like, I want to know what community means to you. And I think that our listeners would want to know too, because like, I think so much about like what you're talking about is like about bringing in like support, right? Community support, like seeing more, having different shades and experiences. So like, do you feel like in not just this, but like other places in your life, other creations that you have, you feel like you have like a commentary on like the importance of community, and like in that, what does community mean to you?
I think
about your game a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it kind of runs through like everything I do, and like so when you bring up like my game, like what brings me to wanting to like develop a game of my own is specifically about like fostering that sense of community. And even like before that, playing games, the only reason I was doing it was because I was like isolated and I was looking for kind of like a social outlet or like a third space to convene and to interact with other people whenever I wasn't getting out. But that is one thing that has been really transformative in the last little bit, has been like being able to play like tabletop games in person and online. And I think that they have a really like powerful effect on like creating community, but also that like collective world building aspect that we're talking about. Like if you can have a group of people come together and then like have them collectively like pour their imagination into like building something new, or like dreaming up scenarios that are like optimistic or like breathe life into like a better future. Like the game that we played together called The Deep Forest, where it's like a collaborative.
I love Deep Forest. It's so good.
Yeah, like collaborative map drawing game, and you're like envisioning what this world looks like post colonization, essentially, like that the humans came in, and you're like you're narrating through the way that the like monsters of this world are rebuilding in this year since they've gone. So it's a really unique tabletop experience. So like, I mean, that's a couple aspects, but I was also thinking about like doing the tarot videos on TikTok, that what community means to me more than anything would be that kind of like reciprocal interaction where I'm able to do the thing that I love and just like give that openly and freely because I prefer to. And then people are able to reflect that value back in the ways that they're able to, or that they prefer. Like if I've ever done art trades or something like that, that everybody has something that they are like naturally attuned to, or like have an affinity for. Like if you want to make like crochet goods or other crafts or something like that, and like that's what you want to contribute, like that everybody has something that they're really good at to offer, and just kind of like fostering that together, you know?
Yeah, no, I do know. We have very similar views on community, but specifically like how you were talking about like everyone having a place reminds me of this book that I recently read called Convenience Store Woman.
Oh my God. Wait, I'm reading that book right now.
You're reading it right now?
I started it this morning.
That's like, fucking crazy. You'll finish it really fast.
Yeah, it's a short book, but
I'll
let you say what you were going to say, but I'm geeking out right now.
No, I love it so much. Like, so what I loved about the book was like, I studied it in my, so I'm pretty sure the style is called Kisho Tenketsu. Yeah, Kisho Tenketsu is the style that it's written in, which is like a 4-act plot structure that's really common in like Asian storytelling where you have like the introduction of the character and then you see more development, like usually the developmental era of that character, and then you have a twist and then a conclusion. And so something that I really enjoyed about specifically Convenience Store Woman was that, I don't want to spoil it for you because now you're reading it.
Oh my
but
gosh.
like I feel like the lesson of Convenience Store Woman is like, sometimes the place that you find the most joy, even if it is the place that is like in a very unusual place, that if you love it, you'll not only become really good at it, but you'll be able to find a role in the community that can help the community exist. And so I had a very interesting conversation. Obviously, like there's a lot of neurodivergence that comes into play, like in this book as well. And like I had a very interesting conversation with the people in my master's program about how it seemed like even if we excuse or remove the neurodivergence, that like what the main character's contentment had, like the contentment that she felt, was demonized by people who were like trying to climb social hierarchies and trying to interact with social hierarchies. And that actually seems to be the criticism that they were receiving that made them feel so alien, not necessarily that like they were in the wrong place or feeling or doing something that was wrong, because like they seem like, if you're someone who has like a lot of like variety in your life, or you have very like lofty dreams, like working every day of your life at a convenience store might not make you happy. That might make you sound like you want to die. But there is someone in this world who would love to work every single fucking day of their life in a convenience store and provide you snacks and know the snacks and provide you with a convenient store experience. And that's where their like light is. And like those same people become criticized by people like us who have these lofty ideals, these larger like concepts and these bigger things that we want to do, by like demonizing the concept of like having like of being like unartistic or uncreative. Like we have these like big goals, and then we see this, like the story feels like a horror story to somebody like me, where I'm like, I want to be an artist and I want to start my own like creative guild and I want to make dreams into reality and do impossible things. Like I sit there and I think about the idea of like working at a convenience store, and my only thought is like, well, this is just a stepping stone for me to make ends meet. But for someone like Keiko, the main character of the book, like it's their happy place, and how it's okay for that to be their happy place, and that it's like, especially when it comes to creativity, I feel like it's still creative because she understands the convenience store more than anyone else. And because she has what I consider a master's level of understanding about the goddamn convenience store, she can then become more creative with the aspects of the convenience store that make it more appealing to its customers. And I just found that book so just like mesmerizing and infuriating. I've been reading a lot of books this semester that like I'm just like not feeling the endings of, because I feel like they're either too abrupt or they're too neatly wrapped up. And I was also angry at the ending of this book because I was like, what the fuck did I just read? But I think you'll enjoy it. And I think we are like way too aligned in regards to stuff like this.
That's
From down to
so
eating
weird.
to watching like what the movies we're watching to the books we're reading. Like that's insane. But like I do feel like that, like everything in its place and everything has its place. So like I just do think that does exist in a world, like in the world, and that we need to curate a space for that, but we can't because there's like this consistent pressure from like society to like make more money, have more money, or just have money in general,
versus like just supporting that. Like if that's what like someone wants to do more than anything, or if they're happy there, like just like support them. And like if like when you're talking about like a means to an end, but if the end was your means, you know, like if the end was that you want to live like a satisfied and like fulfilling life, and you're like, no, I'm like satisfied and fulfilled, and also like I have my needs met by like my community and I'm supported in what I'm doing, like when you're talking about how even like working at a convenience store can provide like a vessel for your creativity to pour into once you're stable in that, like that the effect that you have. And like I work in like customer service retail too, so I think about this sometimes. Like on a good day, I do consider how like every interaction that you have like leaves that person hopefully like having a better day than like before. So like it has kind of like this butterfly effect, I guess. Like
I was just thinking,
like
we are
that,
the butterflies.
like that person that has a better day goes and like does something nice for someone else. Like that's just what it's all about. And it was just funny because like obviously crazy that you brought that up when I literally started reading it this morning. But the book that I finished last night, that is the reason why I'm reading that one now, is Earthlings, and it's by the same author,
cool.
Sayako Murata. And it also has that like 4-part plot structure that you're talking about. But I like stayed up until like 2 a.m. finishing this. It's also a short book, but it's been hard for me to finish books recently. But this one I would just like plowed through in a day because it was so engaging, and it has similar themes. It's basically
it is very engaging.
Have you read it?
No, like her work in general is very engaging.
Yeah. And I mean, I've felt the same way about like what I've read of Convenience Store Woman so far, but with Earthlings, like it's basically about like she like believes that she's an alien because she like perceives society and everything in like a different way. And obviously it's like very like autism coded.
Yeah, I was like, it's scan autism. We scan autistics in this house.
Like, hey, same. But it's basically about like how you can like unbrainwash yourself and like return back, like no matter how like lost you get, like they call it the factory, like the you know, societal structure that pushes you in whatever direction, whatever very specific guided linear direction, that you can like tap out of that and return back to this like essential way of looking at the world. So over the course of the story, like she connects with another person that is the same as her, and then like pulls someone else out of that system, and they like build a little community together essentially.
Well, that's awesome. That sounds good.
So yeah, that I would definitely recommend that. I thought that we might talk about books, but that surprised me that you brought up the book I was reading today.
No, that's okay. No, I think it's good. I mean, why wouldn't we talk about books? We focus on making books. We love contemporary North American. We love not just North American folklore, but we love contemporary folklore and all. And I personally consider Convenience Store Woman 100% folklore.
Yeah.
As in the voice and representation of the people.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, and also I wanted to talk about, you talked about Deep Forest a little bit as well. And so I actually think that like this idea of like community and roles that we play in the community and like rebuilding after colonization is actually a really great segue for us to talk about like the little community members that you made for our magazine.
Yes.
Stanley Springtime and Reginald the Rat King. Reggie the Rat King is much nicer than the Rat King on the cover. So I know that I was the one that was like that you said that you wanted to make the minifigs, and that I was the one that was like kind of like, please make them little fairy thingies after we were talking about it. But I would love to hear some of your inspiration behind them, and like kind of like I would like to hear an imagining of how you imagine like Stanley and Reggie spend their day.
Oh my God.
Just a little one.
I mean, off the top, like I see Stanley as kind of this like, you know, like tarot style fool character, just like bumbling into the next season, like whatever magic brought this little guy alive, because he's basically like a like potted plant golem that's been like animated with life. I imagine it less like he's, you know, like this 1,000-year-old like being that's been in the woods forever, and more kind of like he's just been brought to life by whatever magic, like Fantasia style. Like he's just like sprouted these little roots out of his arms, and he's just like waddling into whatever's coming next. But he's like a baby. but even though he's a baby, he's also like fully integrated with nature. So like when we're talking about, you know, like returning to like an essential way of thinking, I don't know if that's a weird way of putting it,
No, I
but
think it's
like
perfect.
like in a way that is like aligned with like your nature as like a human instead of like what you're taught essentially.
Right.
That's all I mean by that. But because he's like fully integrated with his environment, like whatever his next steps would take would be, you know, they wouldn't be able to be anything other than aligned with like who he is, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
it does like Stanley knows his role within like the kind of like divine
yeah,
orchestrated.
it's just like moving forward and doing his thing, and it's not about like upward mobility. It's just about like whatever like thing spark like piques his interest. So one thing that we talked about was like Stanley in different situations, and I didn't like quite get to that, but like what I imagine of Stanley's day is that Stanley just investigates and explores based on his like curiosity,
like Curious George.
Yeah, very Curious George, and yeah, I loved Curious George, and
Me too.
I would also call Curious George kind of like a fool figure, you know, like just driven by your own whimsy. But yeah, Stanley would like hang out with his little bug friends and look at them real close on his little root arms, and I imagined him like looking at his reflection in the water and becoming aware of himself and like his role in things, but he doesn't have to think too hard about it because he's just living and doing his thing. So for me, Stanley represents kind of like a very soft and like gentle way of being. And so like when I look at him, he makes me feel kind of just like giddy and warm, which is a nice feeling. There is like a little bit of like a spooky quality because like being like an inanimate object that is like reanimated. But I also kind of like identify with that sometimes. Like when it comes to springtime, like coming out of like hibernation from winter, and maybe you've just been going through the motions, and or like you feel like a machine, you just gotta like get your gears spinning again. So I was also kind of inspired by like Miyazaki movies, like some of the creatures in that, like the forest sprites, and also in like Castle in the Sky, where they have the large, yeah, those golems. I don't remember if they have a different name, but the robot guys has like.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying it also reminds me of the like little, like when you were talking about how he's like bumbling and new and fresh. It reminded me of like the Boy and the Heron, which I'm not sure if you've seen the Boy and the Heron, but like the little baby souls that they were talking about.
Yes,
it just reminds me of that energy too.
Yeah, same energy. It's like, hey, I was just born today. Like I'm just a little baby.
I just love a baby.
Like you can never be mad at Stanley. Like even if he like tripped over something, like he's just
his favorite teapot.
He's just figuring it out. And then,
I love that though, because like I feel like that forces like a gentleness too. Sorry, just reminding me of like the revolutions, right? Because this is our cover and like the things that are in it, and like finding a revolution and everything. Like I feel like it's almost like Stanley is a statement about like the things that we need to find in ourselves in some ways too.
That's a really good point, because like we think of revolution as being like, you know, all the like fire and willpower and the grit and the dedication, and like, yeah, it's all those things, but it's also like your ability to like still like in quiet moments, like foster that like stillness and gentleness and compassion, and to be able to hold on to that even when everything is on fire at the same time. Like, so I see Stanley as like a nice little restful character. And
I think
then
Rest is definitely revolutionary in my opinion.
Yeah. Over to Reginald though.
Reginald the Rat King.
he's a little creep. Like he's a little freak.
I
I
love
don't
him.
know what to say about Reginald. So like obviously he's
I made him,
another.
but I don't know what to think about him.
Yeah, right. Like he's another like iteration of the Rat King. But my idea with this, like, well, so you suggested maybe like chibifying the Rat King, but like as far as like where this went, like my hands kind of like took it away, I guess. Like I didn't expect him to end up so creepy.
You think he's creepy? I think he's cute.
I think he's creepy.
I mean, he does.
But in a
He's
good,
a rat.
like in a cute way. Like my intention was to kind of like pacify the like sinisterness.
Yeah, he does look a little sinister. He does look a little steamy.
You know who I was thinking of though is like the bunny from Hoodwinked. Have you ever watched that?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Oh my god, that bunny freaked me out when I was a kid. Boingo? Oh my god, never forget. So like I feel like he's got the same energy as Boingo, like this kind of like cute, you know, like sympathetic character, if you could even call it that. If he didn't have like the whole crown and everything, or like he's got kind of like Chucky energy to me a little bit.
Like the stabby doll Chucky?
Yeah, stabby doll Chucky easily. I don't know if you don't see that. Like maybe I'm changing your perception of Reginald as you're going through this. I do not trust this dude at all.
Okay, so like the way sorry, the way that I looked at Reggie before this conversation was more like the kid at the schoolyard that's like delusional, like a bully. Like he like bullies the other kids, but he does it because he thinks he's better than everybody else, but he's actually like the worst, most poorest kid on the block.
No, that's totally fair. That's accurate. I mean, he's got like 4 chess pieces and
he doesn't look like showers either.
He doesn't even have most of his squares together. 2 castles and 2 pawns. You can't accomplish much with that, you know? I don't know what Reggie's up to.
I didn't even think about it being 2 castles and 2 pawns. And I can't help but interpret literally everything. But the idea of like, what is the only thing that you can do with 2 castles and 2 pawns is like
you can move in straight lines.
You can move in straight lines. And like, I guess if you look at them as like castles being locations and pawns being people, like they can also only play the roles that they have and represent the things that they do. But 2 people can have a conversation and they can also bridge the gap between 2 kingdoms or 2 locations, like, and have community in that. And I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Like, and now I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like super extra heavy about all of the shit that Reggie's been through in his life.
Yeah, I mean, who knows where that little scar in his nose came from. But yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking, like, whenever it was the castles and the pawns, is like essentially that he's like toying with like a representation of like capital, because obviously like the Rat King being like this like nebulous like capitalistic nuisance. But I get so like if the Rat King on the cover is like the fully fledged like version of this that you're really casting out, I guess Reggie could represent like the sort of like the origins of how that like takes root in like a child's mind, I guess, like some of the values that you're taught early on that like you're told to like buy into through like the brainwashing. Like Reggie's all over that. Like if you're a little kid, like Reggie comes to you, he tells you like you do this and that, like he's like a little like gremlin character, like the devil on your shoulder type of deal that just like leads you completely the wrong way.
Yes, well, and also I just thought about this, but like if you cast out the Rat King and only cast them out, there's like no room for like reintroduction or like, what is the term that I'm looking for? Rehabilitation. Yeah, there's no space for rehabilitation. So I feel like Reggie the Rat King, like the chibi version, like can also be like what happens after the villain loses and needs to be rehabilitated. Like
Yeah.
they kind of become like that, like kind of character where like you don't take them too seriously in their mischief anymore. Like they become like a trickster instead of like becoming a trickster instead of like a villain. So like recovering from that darkness and like even having like a sense of humor about it. Like maybe Reggie loves that he only has like maybe he loves that he plays a full chess game with only 2 castles and 2 pawns. And if you got to play with Reggie, you got to recognize that Reggie only got 2 castles and 2 pawns, which means you got to play by 2 castle, 2 pawn rule.
Yeah.
You know?
That's so
much depth. And
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious. And like I'm so good that you thought he was scary, like a little Chucky. Like I definitely like Reggie would shank you, bro. Like with a steak knife, not even with a steak knife, like with a butter knife.
He's gonna stab you in your ankle. But no, I mean, I like that you brought up like what happens after, because I think that would be a really fun like illustration to explore, is because like the way that he's kind of laid out with like his costume and his pieces and everything is like if you took away Reggie's costume, like it's the crown and like the cape that like signifies him as being like a king his or status, like right? His status, right? So you take away his status and then you take away his like play pieces, you take away the chessboard, like all that he's illustrated with is like these status symbols and then like his capital. Essentially like you take away the capital and you take away the status, like you haven't really, it's not like a God, what am I trying to say? Like it's not like a extreme punishment or something like that, like because you haven't hurt him, you've just like redistributed what like should have never been his in the first place. Yeah, exactly. So, and then from there, he's going to have to figure out how to be a little bit more like Stanley, I'd say.
Yeah, or just like a regular forest guy, like for real.
Like, hey, like go try being a regular rat for a little bit.
I could just see Stanley Stanley being assigned like, hey, Stanley, you know, today I think you just should hang out with Reggie, and Stanley being like, yeah, I'll hang out with Reggie. Yeah, I'll hang out with Reggie. That sounds so great because Stanley loves everything and everybody. And then like Reggie just being like, what the fuck?
Oh my God. Those are some of my favorite tropes actually, is so like, have you ever seen What About Bob?
No, but you can tell me about it.
Oh
I love What About Bob. I don't know it, but let's go.
Okay. Well, okay. So just what made me think of this is the trope of the kind of like insufferable, like zany character that like is just like full of like lust for life, and then like the like miserly grump, like maybe it's like a kid and an old man, or just kind of like, you know,
like sunshine rain cloud dynamic type thing.
Yeah, like I think of Due Date and like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, like that type of dynamic. So I mean, What About Mob is my favorite, and I would definitely recommend it. It's basically like this guy that has like severe social anxieties, played by Bill Murray. And
I love Bill Murray.
Yeah,
it reminds me of my dad. So like I love Bill Murray so much. So I'll definitely go watch it.
Yeah. And he like goes to see like a, you know, like renowned psychotherapist to like try to help him with like his issues with like severe anxiety and everything. But Bill Murray's character is just like super friendly and like happy-go-lucky and everything. And the therapist is like, he's an asshole. Like he's not kind to like his family or anything. And like Bill Murray ends up like ruining his like family vacation because the therapist's family likes him more than they actually like their own dad, because they like invite him to stay and hang out with them and everything.
That's hilarious.
And the whole thing is he's just making his life worse and worse and worse, and all he's doing is just being like friendly and kind. Yeah. So like I was thinking of that dynamic, like if Stanley and Reggie hung out, that they'd have that kind of like like Reggie would be, especially if he just had all his stuff stripped away, he'd be like kicking rocks and like all sassy and surly and then Stanley's just like chilling and like loving life. And I imagine that Reggie would probably be like annoyed at him, but he'd end up having to love him because like what other choice do you have than to like appreciate someone who like is always able to see the positive in things and just like go with the flow, you know?
Well, yeah, and then not just that, but through that, like Reggie would learn how to love himself, I think.
Yeah.
Like, and learn how to accept that and accept as things be. And so like on that note, I am very curious, like if there was one impact that you would want to leave on those people who interacted with you or your artwork, what is the one impact or takeaway that you would want them to have?
Like if we could skip past the part where you don't think that you deserve to have nice things. Like that's basically it. Like if you don't think that you like deserve to have a place in a community, or that you don't deserve to be supported for doing whatever it is that you prefer, whatever it is that you love. Like if you want to be an artist or if you want to work at a convenience store, that you think that you need to like aim higher or do more or like, you know, be better or whatever. That like you're already doing more than enough, and like you deserve to be supported in doing that. And like it kind of starts with you, I'd say. Just like your outlook on things. So when I'm thinking of Stanley, like I think that Stanley does represent a like through line in a lot of the art that I create, because he's reminiscent of a lot of the characters that I've created. I do a lot of like fantasy, kind of like inner child inspired, like whimsical, lighthearted, but also kind of in like complex social situations or dangerous. Like I've always liked to juxtapose those things. Like seeing these kind of like innocent characters in like really difficult circumstances, and the way that that kind of like faith and trust in yourself and your own abilities and confidence can carry you through. I don't know if that answers the question.
Oh, that 100% answered the question.
Okay.
Like more than anything, thank you so much for sharing that and your vulnerability. And also, I think that that's a good place to leave our listeners.
Okay.
Because I think that that was a really great, I'm inspired. Like that's the only thing that I can really say is that I'm really inspired by that, because I do think that like everyone has a place and they deserve to carve that space out for themselves and to like love themselves for carving that space out. And I think that that's like a lot of like what you were talking about. So I think that this will be us, me, Hues, your neighborhood fortune teller, and the Guildmaster here at the Fiction Forge, and our lovely Looch, Alex.
Thank you.
Who are going to be signing off. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye. This has been the Guilded Periodically Podcast, brought to you by the Fiction Forge.